but it didn't seem right for him to be in a box with his roommate,
Yeah.
coughing and stuff.
It's terrible. Good evening. I will now call to order the February 10th work session, public hearing on the FY25 budget. May I have a motion? Any questions about tonight's agenda? May I have a motion, please?
I move to accept the agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Dr. Bowling?
All right, what we'll start by doing is reviewing Executive Summary 1. And Executive Summary 1, we actually went ahead and the Finance Office did an absolute wonderful job with this. But instead of having 3, we have 4 because Executive Summary 1 is basically the status quo type of where we're at on the budget. But we were able to cut a few costs. Dr. Nell in the office there was able, with some iReady costs and stuff, we were able to get down probably in the neighborhood of a $10,000 reduction. It's not much, but we have gone through everything again. So when you look at Executive Summary number 1, you can see the main item probably that everybody would be looking at is under the total general fund tax funding, which is the cost to the county. The increase to keep everything as is would be $284,833. And that does include the extra instructional materials for the Literacy Act is wrapped up in that, and the increasing cost of NREP. So I really would like to thank our team for working really hard to keep that as minimal as possible. So basically, when you don't factor in health insurance, salary increases, and new positions, we're at $284,833. What beyond that, and I will tell you there are some caveats that may make this better as far as time goes on, relating to health insurance. For instance, when you look at our executive summaries 2, 3, and 4, everything is wrapped into those now. So those include salary increases, new positions, and health insurance cost increases. We have budgeted, as we've done in the past, on a health insurance cost increase of 10%. That is $301,356. Now, last year, we only came down with a 2% health insurance increase. If that happens again, that's going to move all these executive summaries down about $250,000 to $260,000, which would be great news if that happens. So I want us to kind of think about things like that. This is pretty much as it is, but these numbers could come down. All right, executive summary number 2 includes the a 3% salary increase, which would cost $618,000. And of course, it's got the health insurance estimate. By the way, our health insurance, the last information we got is we would have the renewal rate on or before March 2nd. So we're getting pretty close, but still a while out for that. And you can see it includes the $747 for the new positions that we discussed. When all that is wrapped in there together, the total general fund or cost to the county for a 3% raise is $1.46 million roughly, or $1,468,000. That's the cost of a 3% salary increase. The next executive summary, which is executive summary number 3, that's the one that has a 4% salary increase, which the cost of a 4% salary increase will be $824,000. And that brings the total increase to the locality to $1.67 million is the anticipated cost there. The final executive summary is executive summary number 4. Executive summary number 4 includes a 5% salary increase. The cost of a 5% salary increase is $1,030,000, bringing the total increase to the locality to $1.88 million. Now, some things that may affect this too, and may make this look more positive. Also, I neglected to say on that executive summary number 1, all these include the cost of 2 buses at $135,000 each. So that's a big part. The fact that we were able to get a second bus, the Literacy Act materials, second payment of our world language books in, and NREP cost in, and all come in with a status quo of just $284,000, I think showed some tremendous effort there. Now, some things that will factor in to each of the executive summaries, one of them being if our health insurance costs come in anywhere near last year, we're going to save $250,000 on every executive summary thereabout at about $250,000 to $260,000. The other thing that I included in your information tonight to look at is the fact that we do not have a calc tool yet for the Senate and the House budget, and typically the VDOE and the state don't do calc tools for the House and Senate budget individually. They wait for a conference budget to until that's developed and do one for it. Now, one thing, and I've actually even read it in some media articles, is that both the House and Senate budgets are unusually similar this year, which I think that may lead to a good thing maybe of reaching consensus more quickly. They include similar things, and actually for operating cost FY26, they're actually identical for education. So what would happen is, if you would look, it's a document from the Virginia Department of Ed. They did a crosswalk between the governor's budget and the House and Senate, since there's not a calc tool, and said this is the extra funding that localities would get. We did include all of it because I wanted you all to see the impact of local composite index, but this is a file straight from the VDOE. And if you go over from the Clarke County line, you can see when you go about halfway across the page that the things that would be affected by the House and Senate budget, one of them is for food service and breakfast reimbursement, and you can see that's $2,222 there. The next one is the support cap being completely removed, and what that refers to is in 2009 with the Great Recession, they cut back on the number of positions that were funded by the state through the standards of quality, and that has been slowly chipped away. If that is removed and it's in both, it would generate $220,102 for Clarke County Public Schools. The next one is to reinstate the local composite index cap for early childhood education. That will result in $32,476 additional for Clarke County. And then the last one is just additional special ed funding based on child count, and that would give us $37,408. So actually, when you add that up, what it adds up to is $292,208. So if either the House or Senate budget were to pass today, we would be about $300,000 more to the good. And they actually have identical budgets for FY26 for education. So there's no guarantee that would happen. What will happen now is they'll draft a conference budget, but I think we pretty much can see that we're really close to the conference budget because they're already agreeing on education. And then it'll be negotiation between the governor's budget and the conference budget. But on two things that could be really positive is if the House budget were to pass, we would be $292,000 to the good there. And if our health insurance comes in at a better rate, we would be $250,000 to the good 250, 260. So there you're looking at $550,000 if those two things that could happen, and that would come off of each of the executive summaries. Now, and by the way, this crosswalk gives an extremely conservative ADM estimate, or average daily membership. So we're going to likely see more money than this because they dropped everybody's else the membership down dramatically to not get people over optimistic about funding. And you can see they have us at $1,791, and we're typically around $1,850. So we would actually see more money than that. But to kind of get a comparison, Dickinson County Public Schools is probably the most similar in size to Clarke County, but their LCI is dramatically lower. They actually have fewer students than us, and they're going to get $551,616 to our $292. And there's a lot of other examples along that line of similar sized districts getting much more state funding just based upon the LCI, or the local composite index. Now, the things that are in the House and Senate budget for education, like I said, both of them remove, and I think I just showed you all the Senate, but for education for FY26, we also included it as an attachment, but for FY26, the House budget for operating is identical, okay? The House and Senate budget both remove the support cap, give additional funding to education for special ed. The differences don't really show up in the operating budget between the two for FY26. One thing is the House proposed adding $50 million in investment to VRS, or Virginia Retirement. The Senate proposed adding $35 million to VRS, but those don't show up in operating cost. Also, the House has added $150 million in extra construction grants for substantial renovation and construction, in addition to the governor's budget, and that's not in the Senate budget, but that also would not affect FY26 operating. The only other thing is, and it's not in FY26, both the House and the Senate have a bonus payment to educators based on on standards of quality, or SOQ. And what standards of quality is the framework of the very, very minimum skeletal framework that it takes to operate a school system. But both the House and Senate have proposed a $1,000 bonus to educators. The Senate one is a little bit easier to understand because it's payable by June 1st of this year. So that money actually is not any different in FY26 either, because it's going to be back allocated to FY25 if it happens. And we would have to pay that bonus out by June the 1st, 2025. Now, on that bonus, it's a no local match bonus and does not run through LCI. What that means is for every standards of quality position, you get exactly $1,000 and the FICA for the $1,000 grant bonus. Now, that is a much more advantageous standpoint to us than sometimes in the past. There have been past budgets that run through LCI, which would mean you'd only get like 40% of that cost. Now, even though there's no local match, though, the thing is not every person in our division is standards of quality, and nobody's designated as standards of quality or not. Almost no divisions do that. So there is a cost to getting that bonus access to everyone else. But it would be, the way it was worded, it would be that divisions would work really hard to come up with that money to give the $1,000 bonus to everybody. But if you cannot, because it's not budgeted for in this year, you could take the total amount of money you got, divide it by your employees, and give that amount out to everybody. Now, not to get too deep in the weeds, the House bonus is the same, but it's payable by September 1st, 2025, which is really kind of odd because that crosses 2 fiscal years. So we'll have to kind of figure that out if that were to happen. Other than that, I don't think probably too much discussion about the bonus is warranted because it's all hypothetical right now and may or may not happen. And that's just something to keep in the back of our mind, but it's independent of this budget discussion because it's in a different fiscal year. I think that is all that there is that has occurred with the budgeting process since. Now, one thing before I let you all, just any conversations or thought, in addition to if the Senate and House budget, a version of that would pass, we would come out much better in our health insurance. Also, I've talked to Mr. Terneri, who is wonderful about really giving back, and said that he truly needs 2 buses next year, but that if it makes a difference in getting, money to our employees, and I think it shows a really good effort of taking care of people, that it would be kind of kicking the can down the road, but we could kick it down the road 1 more year and do 2 buses next year, or if we have any money left over this year, how we sometimes request that to be rolled over to capital, we could make it a priority to buy a bus with that money if we have it, once we know. And that could save, some cost. But that's pretty much all there is, so I'll take your all's questions and then let you all discuss.
Before we do that, I'm gonna just open it up now to public hearing. So I'm gonna open it up for public hearing, on the FY '26 budget. Any comments, those wishing to speak should fill out a speaker's card. Ms. Spear? Pam? Nope. No? No. All right, I will close the public hearing. We can go ahead and discuss now.
Question on the, you mentioned the money that for construction project, that's specific for school infrastructure, or is that something that includes other things too?
It's specific for schools. There are no criteria out yet because it's just in a budget document. The governor has money in his budget for schools construction too. That happened last time 2 years ago because typically, other than selling bonds, normally the state doesn't get into the business of maintaining and renovating schools. It's a long time been considered that was a factor of the locality to maintain and build school buildings. I think the history of that is around when road maintenance become a big deal, and there was kind of an agreement that the state would handle roads if the locality handled school buildings. But 2 years ago, there was a grant program for school funding, but it was prioritized for divisions that showed that their current buildings were in really bad state of disrepair and inadequate and needed to be modernized or brand new. And it had to be substantial renovation or complete new construction. And it was a competitive grant, and LCI was one factor in whether you got the money or not. Not saying that's how it'll be again, but there is another round of specific school construction grant funding that's in the governor's budget, and it's now in the House budget to add an additional $150 million over what the governor has. If it passes, they'll come out with criteria of what it means to be able to access that money and stuff. Another criteria last time was it had to be for a building that occupied students for learning during the day. Like if you had an athletic facility, it couldn't be used for it, or a central office, it had to have kids for instructional purposes. But if it happens, what they did last time is once it's passed, they send operations director, they sent a grant application out once it passed. And you had to write that narrative to see if you were funded or not.
Okay, going down my list. The monies that would increase the $292 I think, thousand, if stuff passed. Has that happened before with, for us? I mean, did we get anything extra because of bills that were passed that we hadn't expected or counted on?
Last year it happened. It's not atypical. We typically, at this point in time, you're never going to pass a budget based on knowing what the final Virginia budget is. We know what the governor's proposed budget is. And last year, the budget that passed was closer to the House and Senate budget in the end. I don't know the additional money that Clarke County got, but the county I was in got about $270,000 extra between the governor's budget and the final budget.
Nancy, do you remember? So last year, when the budget was finally passed, it ended up being more money than we had thought, right? I don't remember the final number. I don't either. But I think when that does happen, the county share then is decreased.
It
Okay.
is.
Right, so just because the state gives us more, doesn't mean the county's still gonna give us what they.
That was my question.
Yeah, right,
Okay.
Nancy, I think that's right.
Last year, they shorted our
Yeah.
budget by that amount.
Yeah.
And that's what typically happens in a lot. It just means the cost to the locality goes down.
Sure.
The only way that the cost of the locality certainly wouldn't go down is if the money's earmarked for specific things that weren't in the budget before. But that's not the case with this money. So typically, it's a good thing for the county. It just reduces the county's cost. Now, there are times that, county's in a really good financial situation, that if the money comes in better later on, that you could go back and request additional funding. But that would be something that would be you'd ask for an increase in revenue to your budget if that happened.
I'd be curious to see what those numbers were the last few years. If whatever was passed at the state level and what that allowed the county to back off. Just
Yeah.
I just think it'd be interesting to see.
Nancy, can you see if you can do it for the last, did we talk about this? Can you just look to see what the state ended up, what their final dollar amount to us was, and then how that impacted whatever we were supposed to get from the county? Maybe the past few years, 3 or 5 years? That'd be great.
And one thing to remember too, I think that they're so close to agreement that we would be okay. But even the governor's proposed budget's not a guarantee at this time, because they have to reach an agreement before June 30th, and there have been times, unfortunately, that this has drug out until June before a decision was made. And the other thing is, we're in the second year of a biennium budget. So if they can't reach agreement by June 30th, which I hope doesn't happen, then we're funded based on last year's formula, which would decrease money. That's why, and it is kind of new for me to do budgets this early. Now, the last district I was in was what I thought was early, because we were passing them in March, because the district before I was in was doing it in April. But it's important for locality funding, but when you're passing a budget this early, you're not typically going to know what the state budget looks like exactly.
So I know there's only 3 of us here.
But, well, I guess, any other additional questions?
Well, I just want to be clear also on the, when you're going through the executive summaries, all the variance numbers there at the bottom line, that's just compared to what we got for
That's
25.
Comparable to this year.
Right, so that's right to this year.
Yes. And there is one more document in the attachments, if y'all want to look at it. It was the slide, Mr. Brumback, that you'd asked for,
Yeah.
which is the difference between what we requested and what the locality was able to pay. Now, that's it, yeah. Now,
Oh, that's
what I'll say is, to me, what it shows is that the county has been really good in working with us. Now, if you'll look, typically we've not gotten funded at what we initially requested, but not being here historically, there's two explanations to this. One of them would be the state budget passed at a better amount, which reduced their contribution down, or they may not have been able to afford our initial request. But like if you look at last year, the school board asked for $16,572,433. The Board of Supervisors actually approved $15,972,433, which would be less $600,000. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they cut us that. That could be close to the increase in the state budget. And that's how that kind of works all the way down through there. And then the other one, the table on the other side, is just simply the difference. The $16,572,433 that we requested last year from the locality was $1,654,678 more than we had the previous year. And the Board of Supervisors actually funded us at $1,232,652 over the previous year. So you can kind of see there how that works out. But if I was thinking, I would think a lot of that has to do with the state budget passing at a more favorable rate.
So Nancy, maybe you can take this document and just add to it with the state information. That way it's all together. Do you mind? That would be great if we can work to do that.
I guess any other questions for me, or you all can discuss among yourselves there?
Well, the reason I asked for that was just to kind of, last year, we asked for, it was a big difference.
Well, I mean, we
We
only because
had-
of the LCI.
Right.
Yeah,
And,
that's what makes it feel like it was.
and
yeah.
so that's my only, I just throw that out there. When we're looking at our variance numbers, it's not, all your percentages here, and it doesn't seem like, okay, well, that's pretty good, even up to the 10% where you're like, is a lot. But you're comparing it to something that that's been bumped up already a lot from the previous year, from this year.
Yeah, and I mean, I hear what you're saying at the same
That's
time.
all.
It's so out of a lot of it was out of our control, right? And
Yeah,
just the
right.
cost of doing business is gonna increase by almost 300,000,
Yeah, I know.
right?
Yeah, and one thing when you look at the 4%, to be honest, that would cost $1.64 million. That's right about what we asked for initially last year. So the 4% would put us in line for almost a close to an equivalent increase. Now, like I said, if the health insurance comes back better or the state budget, this gets to be a lot more favorable. And one thing that we can do before we do the final budget is, if everybody feels good about it, we could cut down to one bus and just try to get it out of capital if we have end-of-year funding this year, or at very worst, knock it down the line one more year. But we would make that a big priority to get that out of capital. If we have excess funding at the end of the year and we request to be able to use that, and the Board of Supervisors, that would be pending them agreeing to that. The other things that I did in looking at some of the, and you all have the comparison that Dr. Seal did, which is wonderful, of our salary scale for teachers at a 3%, 4%, and 5% increase. At a 4% increase, teachers would get between a $2,112 raise and a $3,266 raise. At a 5% increase, they would get between $2,640 and $4,082.
Sorry, can you say that again? I'm sorry.
On that one that shows the differences, I didn't do the 3, but the 4% raise would give teachers, according to what step they're on, between a $2,112 annual raise and $3,266 annual raise.
Okay.
At a 5% raise, it would give us between $2,640 increase up to as much as a $4,082 increase. I only point that out because hopefully our health insurance will come back good and they'll get to take that money home. But even if we do those, if the health insurance comes back at 10, it may not be a substantial increase in, living money.
Can you say that 4% range again?
Yeah, it's between $2,112 up to $3,266. And then the 5 is $2,640 up to $4,082. Now, as far as comparing to other localities, we are unique and offer a lot of unique things that make us positive, but we do always want to be mindful of that. But as far as comparing to other localities, it's almost a prediction model at this point because we really don't know what everybody's going to do. One thing that we do know is if the Frederick County scale passes as it was presented in the budget, they did mention that the step 0 would go to 54,000. And our step 0 would be with the 3% raise, 54,384. So we would remain above them even at a 3%, but only at the beginning. And by the time you get to the upper salary scales, because it mentioned adding a $5,000 on to the upper salary scales, we would then be getting behind between $12,000 and $15,000. So that would be concerning there. But at least there at the beginning, we would remain competitive, but we're only talking at that very first initial step. At the 3% mark, the way I calculate it, we would probably, in all likelihood, even on step 1, fall behind everybody that's around us except for maybe 1 or 2. The 4% would allow us to remain pretty competitive, and the 5% would likely keep us really competitive, but it's according to what we can afford. So those are just some thoughts there.
So I will off the bat say, I want a 5% increase. I know we can't do it. So I just saying that right now.
And I will say, even as superintendent, I wanted a 5. I don't think we can physically afford it.
Yeah.
It's up to whatever you all arrive at, though. I don't want to lose people. I would like to either get a 4 or a 4.5. And I think that if the difference between 4 and 4.5 is the bus
Is the
being put
bus.
into capital, those are my thoughts, because I think if we do anything less than 4, we're not going to remain competitive at all.
And our buses, 130,000?
5,000.
So that's like the 0.5%.
Does the state ever do any programs for transportation type funding like they do on construction?
They have done one, but not for a typical bus, and I don't know that it'll ever get replicated again. There was a grant for no-cost electric buses to school divisions maybe 4 or 5 years ago. The county I was working in at the time, we were supposed to get one, but we were one of the very first that got cut when they weren't able to fund as much. But the county that I'd worked in previously got, I think, 4 or 5 of them, and they were at no cost, but that's the only time that that's happened. And it was where they were electric and newer technology.
Well, I don't think, I would agree to cutting down to 1 bus request, but I don't think we should cut it out.
You mean both buses?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely.
No, I think we
No, I
definitely
think
have to
if-
leave
yeah.
one in, and I think the other one, either we need to see if we get money back at the end of the year, that we can do it, or to the next year. I think we have to leave at least one in, and we have to have a caveat that we're going to make the bus a priority out of end-of-year spending if we can this year, and the Board of Supervisors lets us move that to capital, and if not, moving it into FY27 if we can't fund it.
I'd almost even push to leave both of them in there. And
See what happens?
yeah, because I think Mr. Gennari does a great job, and he's not asked, he wouldn't ask if we need it, and
Oh,
and all
absolutely.
they're gonna do is get more expensive.
Right, I was gonna say we have to, if we're
But-
not gonna do it, then we need to at least add it for this year, hopefully.
I mean, because to me, I can, that is something you can grab a hold of, is a tangible thing that is definitely a need. And I would rather push for that and support that, you know, and same with the positions. I don't want to, I want to see the positions filled. I want to see all the, what I think are the top needs before I would support bumping up that salary increase.
So what are you
Now,
saying?
whatever money we get, we can discuss, all right, so let's move a bus till next year and use that money to help maybe bring up a salary increase. I'm just saying what we present to the Board of Supervisors, I just think we can defend this for 26. I think we can defend buses probably more than trying to bump up another percent or even 0.5%. I just get that feeling with the way things are in the county.
Yeah, the only thing would be if we do the buses, it'd be in a different line item. So after it was passed, we'd have to stick with that and not, do salary.
We can't rearrange.
You're probably not categorical, so you might could, but
It's not, that's, it's not ideal.
Well, I know.
Because, and the only reason I say that is because, I feel like, so I don't know if I completely understood everything you were saying outside of, we definitely want the 2 buses, but, are you saying, let's fight for these 2 buses, let's get these positions, let's kind of request based on some type of salary increase, we'll see what we get, and then we can go from there?
Yeah,
Is that
because
what
there's
you're
still so
saying?
many unknowns.
Right, so I think though for salary increases, the county, they want to know what we're thinking. So we can't go in there and be like, oh,
No,
we're gonna do
I
great,
agree.
right?
I agree. I'm
So-
just saying, and without knowing so much,
Right.
and things being so much up in the air,
Yeah,
I think we go and we present to the county and be able to defend wholeheartedly everything that we ask for. And
I-
then, because as far as the county concerns, then, the full sum, they're going to give that to us. But I was under the impression we could kind of, once we get it, we could kind of manipulate it a little bit if something changes. That's what I mean with the state, something passing, and oh, well, we have more coming.
if the state passes more, unless we ask for additional revenue, though, it would just cut the locality cost down. It wouldn't increase anything to us.
Yeah, that's what's done in the past. That's why I want to know. I want to know how much the state has been saving the county, just so we can get a feeling. That's all. I'm
Yeah,
not,
no, I hear.
speaking one way or the other. I
Yeah.
just like to know
yeah,
so that we can, whatever it is, negotiate or say, hey, we can do this and pass this off and just try to make it all work out for the best on both sides. That's all.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's a little bit early in the year to be thinking about like end of year spending, what would be left, because things could break. But what we could do is see if, Nancy and Brenda might come up with an estimate of what it's looking like we're at currently at their end of the month meeting where we pass the budget, to see if it's likely that we could cover the cost of a bus or not.
What are your thoughts?
So, I have read, there are concerns about the, 78 for the English teacher and $78,000 for the math teacher. That's not, so how do you come up with that number? Is it like, you know, kind of looking at maybe like 10 years of experience and then also throwing in benefits, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that it would come in at that. You just have to have a placeholder. And I can't remember how far up the salary scale we went, and maybe Dr. Seal or Nancy may remember on that. But what we did is we just picked an average step, maybe at step 10, and said, here's the cost. Was it 10?
Yeah.
And it's 10 years of experience with benefits added in. Could come in if you hire somebody at step 0 and they don't have individual only insurance, then that could come down a lot more.
Right. So it's not that,
It doesn't mean they're getting that.
no, right. Yeah. I think it's important for people to understand that.
Do you have any thoughts about the salary?
I think 4%.
Okay.
So I am definitely at 4%. I would love 4.5, but I'm not interested in going lower than 4 if we can help it. I know Mr. Kennedy feels the same way. Michael, not sure about. So it's just a matter of what our request is going to be. I mean, it sounds like we're all in favor of these positions, right?
Yeah, I think
And-
we're almost done. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think if we do it based on 4, and it seems like everybody's in favor of the positions, so the only other question is to leave 2 buses in or not.
Right.
Because the bonus actually would come out, if it happens, out of this fiscal year either way.
And so for some of these positions, like, could they be repurposed? Meaning that, like, so we don't need maybe an assistant at this building, so we're gonna move that person to another building because
Yeah, we can move positions within.
you can move positions, and then could you potentially save, you know, 20,000 to 40,000 by just shuffling? We've done that in the past, but, so this is kind of an overestimate.
It would be if we had additional people, and I don't know, you know, that
Yeah.
their other position wouldn't be needed, and I don't think that that was the case, but this is an overestimate because it's based upon everybody here coming in with 10 years of experience,
Okay,
so.
okay.
Are you thinking maybe if someone were to resign, that maybe we don't necessarily fill that position because we can shuffle a little
Right,
from here?
right,
Maybe
right.
that's where that
Right.
works,
Which,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
what we've done in the past,
We can
right?
consider each position that becomes vacated
right.
one by one as that happens, yeah.
Which we've, I feel like that's we do, yeah. I mean, we had the conversation about some IAs, right?
Yeah. mhm.
There were some IAs where they're vacant.
Right,
So
right.
we're gonna kind of keep them that way for now.
I did find out that those are for our self-contained room and really vital, so we've
Yeah.
been looking
So
ongoing
we
for
are
that.
going to,
Yeah.
yeah, which makes sense.
Okay. Mr. Brumback. I'd like at least to have a little bit of an idea of where you want to land on salary.
I guess I'm going back and forth between the reality of it and the want. I mean, I'm at the 4% too. I just don't know if that's,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's responsible.
Well, so it's interesting because you made the comment about where we can defend a bus, we can defend these positions. I can defend the salary increase. We just, it's not tangible like
know.
you know, which is kind of how your mind works, and I appreciate that, but, So I kind of feel strongly that I absolutely think it's defendable. But I think we all feel the same way. It's a lot of money.
Yeah,
But we have to take care of
we do.
our people. And, you know, from a personal standpoint, and, you know, you can say it's my ego or not, we have busted our heinies trying to get to a really good place with our salaries in regards to the neighboring counties. We have worked very hard. I would hate for us to slide back because it's going to take that much longer to get back ahead, especially with how.
Well, knowing what we know is coming.
That's right.
With the reassessment.
That's
and,
right,
you
yeah.
know, it's not gonna get better.
No. I mean, we're struggling at .60 or wherever we're at, and I'm stressed we're gonna be at.
It's just gonna, it's gonna be tough.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, everybody's property taxes went up. The reassessment
That's right.
nailed it. I mean, it's, you know,
You'll be having.
50% up.
Yeah.
And I know there's ways that we're fortunate, you know, that the county kind of tries to soften that. But you're talking,
So this conversation where you're like, well, look at what we asked for last year, it's like, we're gonna be saying the same exact thing next year.
well, I know, but I'm
And-
just
and
saying, as
then
far as
some.
the average taxpayer, you know, if the county can cover it, it's great, and they've done really good without bumping our taxes up. But
It's so frustrating though
it's
that
tough.
like that we are this county that has deep pockets of wealth. That I don't hang out with these people. I wish they could, you know,
Clay, you
give
don't
us
invite
some
us to your
grants or
parties.
something.
Just kidding.
But there are, and there are people who have these, you know, $1 million properties that live here on the weekends and work in DC during the week, and they like our lower tax rates. And that's not who we hang out with, or, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but, you know, that's not who my kids have grown up with. But that's, you know, that adds to the complexity of, you know, of the situation. And it's really frustrating that we have people who use this beautiful place as a vacation space or, you know, an escape to get away from the city, but they're not going to send their kids to school here. And they don't care about the sports here or the band program here or, you know, the wonderful things that we're able to offer. And it's really frustrating. And it puts our county in a difficult spot. But, you know, it's, there's a lot of wealth that like you don't see, I think. That I don't see. And that just, I don't know how you get around that though.
At the 4%, which is the $1,674,936, if the state budget passes at the House and Senate estimate and health insurance comes in at what we did last year, it'll make it like close to 1,124,936 in the requested increase, which is a little bit less than last year. And if we were not to do a bus and do it out of capital in the end, it would actually bring the request under $1 million slightly, the increase. But I think I can kind of see maybe putting the 4 in for the final budget and you all seeing it and voting on it. And I can see the position part. I guess one thing we'll have to get clarification on is whether to keep 2 buses in the budget or to take one out and hope we can fund it at the end of the year or FY '27. So just kind of your all's thoughts on that.
Any chance we can try to see where we might land at the end of the year by the next finance committee meeting? Not this week,
That
next
one's-
week. Tomorrow. No, I'm assuming we are rescheduling,
Yeah.
right? So next one. Yeah, and just kind of, not looking for it down to the penny, but you know, I think that might give us an idea then if we're looking solid or if we're still kind of, yeah. So that might give us an idea of whether we go for one or two.
But whatever we submit, if the county says, no, we'll give you this much, then we have to go back through and see where we
Yeah.
we allocate all that anyway.
Yep, that's right.
We do at that point, and you've got to remember to touch the state money, it has to be at least 3. So if it's not that, then we're going to be making some really hard decisions.
Right. So I guess
So
that
it's-
would lead me to say, let's leave everything in there.
Uh-huh. I see what you're
That's a
saying.
good
Yep.
point.
Yep.
So then we can pull.
We can pull, yeah.
All right, we'll do the 4% then, if it sounds good to everybody, with the positions and 2 buses. I think that
I think that's.
leaves everything answered.
I think so. And let's just count on the universe coming in and doing no increase on health insurance. It'd be amazing. If that number comes in, then we might not be given, we might be eating into people's paychecks more than we're trying to give them, so.
Well, unfortunately, that's the reality.
I know. Okay, so just to recap then, so Nancy, I'm sorry, you end up with to-dos, but if we can add the state information, state funding on this, this one document, that way we can have it all on one sheet, and then if we can kind of get some high-level, reasonable idea of where we're gonna land at the end of the year. And then sounds like we're all for the executive summary, is it 3?
Yeah,
Yeah.
executive summary 3.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? I was really thinking it was gonna be a long meeting. Thank you. Okay.
Just a quick question, just
Yep.
for discussion purposes, or curious. Our retention over the last however many is steadily going up, correct? Kathy, or,
I've not been here but I've heard that it's good, and I'll let Dr. Seal answer that, but I think we've only got 1 or 2 that have said so far that they're thinking about not being with us next year. So it's been very positive.
Are you talking about in general over the past few years?
Yeah, I'm
Oh,
just-
yeah, our
Yeah,
retention,
yes.
yeah,
I
it's
think-
been pretty high. Meaning they're staying. Yeah.
It's remained very favorable. You know, if we have 15 people who are moving and shifting that create a vacancy, that's a high number for us. Right now, we have 1 elementary vacancy for the upcoming year, 1 high school mathematics, and then we have the reading specialist vacancy, that was from a retirement. Now, of course, it's early and people can put that they're gonna stay on their intent to return, but I'm not hearing otherwise at this point.
Right, and I think, a lot of it comes down to how you treat people, and there's other things we can do that are important too. One thing that is becoming a reality is, and I don't think that due to amount of funding they have that we can ever think about, the Loudon competition piece, but when you look at the end of their salary scale, which is about 30,000 more roughly for teachers, it won't be as long a problem as much long-term, because hybrid, it's more about what you invest in your retirement. But our people that are BRS Plan 1 and 2, in particular Plan 1, it's a little bit north of 50% of your gross pay is what your VRS is the rest of your life when you retire. So when you think about a Plan 1 teacher, if they were to go to Loudon, they're probably, and they do 3 years because it's the average of your highest 3 years, they would be adding about $15,000 a year onto their salary annually the rest of their life. One thing to consider as the gap kind of opens with Frederick with us, which is going to go, could go as much as about 15,000 in the upper steps next year. That becomes a relevant thing too, because
Yeah.
a VRS Plan 1 person could take home about $7,500 more a year by doing 3 years there. I think that one side is exactly how you treat people is very important. The other side too, that business side, that as gaps open up, there is an advantage, and with the way VRS works, that's a rest of your life type deal. But I do think that concern will diminish as the years go on, because hybrid became the only option in 2014. So the people who are not on hybrid are becoming fewer and fewer as time goes on. Yeah. In other words, you have to be old to be on plan 1 or 2.
But I think that there are other, like, that we've seen, especially this year, there are some intangible qualities in Clarke County that you maybe don't have in other places, and I say that because of the number of kids, not kids, they're adults, who've come back here to teach, who were students and graduates of Clarke County, and that's
Yeah, I agree.
remarkable, especially with not a lot of people wanting to go into the education field right
Well,
now.
it's obvious they just want to work for this school board is really what it comes down to.
They
But
heard
it
your,
would-
You know what's a coincidence? You're here now and all these kids came back, Clay?
No, but
Wow.
on a serious note, I think that's something that we
That's
need to pay
huge.
attention to. And I don't know what else is, you know, in the survey, and that survey that gets responded to is mostly employees. But where we're at on those others, not salary, but I mean, because it's, I mean, you can have a high salary and not be a very happy employee because of certain, you know, whatever.
yeah.
And I know the student teacher ratio is on there, but I'd be interested in getting feedback from everyone on that. And if we our retention rate is going up, then,
That's
you know, are we, where, and is that making a difference?
Well, there's a lot of research that actually shows that recognition and feeling valued and having feedback are sometimes as important, if not more important, than dollars to employees. So there's a lot that shows that. So I do think that's a very important component of it. And then the other component, which is more on the dollar sign, I think that you all have done a tremendous job being very competitive with everybody around you currently, except for Loudon and maybe Frederick in the upper steps. So I think it's a combination of both, that there's the other side to it, which is getting feedback and feeling individual attention, but then there's also the side that would come from us being pretty competitive currently.
I know it's work session on budget, but along, just along the same lines, when we're talking about, it doesn't necessarily have to be like the dollar amount, but we have to vote on our calendar at the end of the month. And so as part of that would be those floating holidays, right? And so if we were to include the 3 or 5 floating holidays, right, that's just another sort of, here, we appreciate you. We know we can't give you all the holidays, but, you know,
Well,
take what you want.
right, and that
Yeah.
needs to be stressed, whether it's in, you know, whether it's in the paper and highlighted, but you
In
know,
bold letters, red font.
Well, because we are up against it with
Yeah.
with our composite index. And yes, we would love to be able to say, we're gonna do 5%, boom, 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 boom.
Right.
But we can't. And so there are other things
That we're trying, yep.
that, you know, if you could equate a value to, you know, we could come in and instead of just the 2,000 to 3,200 increase at 4%, it may be a whole lot more. It may be twice that. If we're
Right.
doing beef, we'd be even more, right?
And actually, 2 of our policy committee things revolve around those. So one of the things is, if we do pass the calendar as it is, it has 190 working days for our teachers, which would actually give them credit for 10 days that they either can stay at home, or they don't know, like, we're not going to check into that piece, but we're giving them 10 days credit for grading and planning. So that's an intangible piece of that votes. And then to do either 3 or 5 floating holidays for our 12-month employees, those are some things we can do that don't necessarily cost money, but are ways that we can take care of people.
all for it.
There we go. All right, anything else? Nope. Thank you for being here. I'll adjourn the meeting. Appreciate you. Thank you for all your work. Appreciate everything and your ginormous binder. Yeah.